In this video, we'll go over some features the Orbit plugin has to make actors or projectiles travel through tubes. The first thing we'll look at is how to make a projectile go through this tube up here. And the second thing is we'll have our character jump down this tube, travel through it, and come down to this platform down here. So first, here's an example of what it's going to look like. Here's our projectile going through the tube. And next we'll walk over to the other tube and jump down it. And we're going to travel through it for a bit. And here we are at the other side. To start out, create a new project that is a first-person blueprint project, and that will give us a character with a projectile. The first thing you'll need to do is actually create the tube. So to do that, there are lots of tutorials on the internet already about how to create a spline and then have a static mesh wrapped around the spline. I'll add a link in the comments section to the one I used. The static mesh I'm using to wrap around the spline is in starter content, shapes, and shape tube. It's one of the Epic meshes that Epic provides for free, and make sure it has a collision added to it, which it does. And so after you create your spline, you need to add a gravity mass actor and set the owner to the spline shape there. And we're also going to add a few options. So this first option here will affect gravity. That just means the gravity is enabled for the tube. The second option, anti-gravity, that means gravity will repel the object instead of pulling it towards it. So if the object is down here towards the bottom of the tube, the Orbit plugin will provide a upwards direction to the gravity. The next option is check gravity for inside object. And so what that's going to do is it's going to check to see if the projectile is actually inside an object. And if it is, it will apply gravity to both sides. So if the projectile is down towards the bottom, it will calculate its gravity in the up direction, and then it will also calculate its gravity from this point up here at the top of the tube, pushing down on the sphere. So that will temper the gravity a little bit. So if we didn't turn this on and the ball was down here, there would only be a force upwards, and it'd be very bouncy to the top and then to the bottom to the top. Here this kind of smooths it out. The next option is only effective inside the object. So with that turned on, when we fire the sphere, this object will only affect the sphere when it's actually inside. And then the last one, use closest point on static mesh for a gravity calculation. So that will tell the plugin to use the closest point on the static mesh for the gravity distance. If we turn that off, it would just use the center of this object, wherever that might be. So with all those turned on, oh, and we also changed the minimum distance for kinematic gravity. So this, with kinematic mode, if the object gets very, very close to the gravity mass, you could get exponentially large values. So we'll make that 500 Unreal units as the minimum distance for the calculation. So there won't be any large exponential gravity effects for one frame that would mess things up. The next thing we need to do is go to the projectile blueprint. We'll open that up, and here is the orbit movement component that's added to the projectile. We are the first thing we're doing is we're setting the start velocity in local space. So this means that this start velocity is going to be a local vector, not a world vector. So its start velocity of the projectile is going to be 5,000 units in the x direction. And we'll turn off start circularized because we're not doing anything involving orbits here. We also have substepping turned on. For something like this, substepping is important because if the system goes too long between frames, the projectile will shoot out in one direction and it won't be really what we want. So we'll use substepping for this. And that is all we need to do. So we'll close this, hit play, and there we go. Next, we're going to get the tube that we're going to jump down into working. The setup for the tube is very similar to the last example. We'll turn on each of these options and make sure the owner of this gravity mass is this tube. Next, we have to modify the first-person character blueprint, so we'll open that up, and we've added the orbit movement component to the actor's component list. We changed the start velocity. We just want the character to start off with no velocity, and again here we're using substepping. That's all we need to do here. So we'll go back and hit play. And now when we jump in the tube, it will perform just like the projectile performed as it went down the tube. And you see when we got to the end there, we kept going off the ledge. And that's because the orbit movement had velocity attached to it as it came out of the tube, and we haven't done anything to tell the orbit movement component that you should stop when you hit something. So if you open up the character blueprint again, down here what we've done is on the capsule component we've added a on hit event, and what we're going to do is when the capsule hits something, we're going to call the handle a hit function from the orbit movement component, and we'll open this up to take a look at it. All this is doing for a default implementation is just setting your velocities to 0. So we'll hit compile and save, and we'll do the same thing. And now when we reach the bottom and hit the platform, our character should stop. And there we go, we are stopped. Alright, so that's the end of this tutorial. Thank you for watching.